Have you ever gotten any kind of random interactions from people just passing by who stopped and were like, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, like when we had Lebanese niche, some people thought it was a fruit juice shop because it looked so familiar with a plastic table and all these like fruit.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Quickfire Questions. Today I'm at the new Takeover Beirut location in Ashrafieh with the founder Ieva, who has generously welcomed us in for this interview today. I want to start this episode off by a brief introduction about who you are, your line of work, anything that you think we should know about you before we start this episode.
Okay, hi, I'm happy to have you here. My name is Ieva, Saudargaite Douaihy. I'm Lithuanian Lebanese. I've been living here 16 years. And I studied architecture, and then very organically I gravitated towards architectural photography, then towards being an artist, which is a word I have a problem with. But yeah, I mean, photography is my go-to medium, but I've also experimented with others. I opened up this space almost a year ago. So I'm also a founder of Takeover Beirut, as well as Digital Fountain, which is a platform for photographers, and it's mainly online. It's a website.
Okay, that's a nice, concise introduction. Let's talk about Takeover. Why did you launch this space? What did you hope to see as a result?
I think the space launched itself and me with it.
Okay.
It's a story that I always get surprised by, because it literally started with a search for a pop-up location for Digital Fountain. Mm-hmm. It was around a year ago. I was thinking that it's time to launch Digital Fountain in a physical space because we were primarily online. And I started my walk along the streets. And the first space that I liked and photographed was just down the road. That was the first location of Takeover. And I met with the landlord. I said, can I rent it out for a few days? She's like, I've never done this before. Let me think about it. She's like, why don't you take it for 6 months? And it kind of made sense. It wasn't that expensive. And we moved in a month later with the pop-up event. And while sitting there, I'm like, I'm not going to be a shopkeeper. The space was very inspiring. It was a kitchen for a patisserie that had moved out. And I don't know, I just found it very inspiring being there. So I said, this is perfect. This can really evolve into something experimental and fun. And that's what happened. I mean, after Digital Fountain, we invited 2 photographers to show their project. And then just kind of the ball kept rolling.
Okay, so the space really did find you.
Yeah. It was really like a love at first sight.
So you mentioned that the first event you actually had was something for Digital Fountain.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what that was?
So basically, we did like a bit of a scenography to accommodate different sizes of prints that we have with Digital Fountain. And I also invited other photographers to exhibit more original, let's say, more limited edition pieces. Mm-hmm. So to have like this dialogue between things that are quite affordable, because the whole premise of Digital Fountain that it's not expensive to have a print from a local photographer, as well as with more kind of nicely framed pieces on the other side, which is like literally 2 meters away. So we had the whole space really populated with images.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned that Takeover is a repurposed, it started off as a repurposed kitchen, which is also something you brought up when we first met, and I found quite curious at the time. When I visited, it really was a repurposed kitchen. There were white tiles on the walls, and it was quite small, I guess, just to accommodate the bakery next door. Yeah. So I was wondering, do you think that kind of created a certain aesthetic for Takeover at the time? How did it help the space? Do you sometimes look back at it and you go like, oh, maybe this wasn't the initial intention, but you just went with it?
Well, the funny thing is with love at first sight is that you are already, you have already kind of an image in your head, and then you see it and then you go for it. you kind of fall in love with it. So I've always loved white tiles. Okay. It reminds me of metro stations in Paris and probably other places that I've liked. And I think, yeah, this was like really like a click. So the tiles were there, the grids were there. And when we moved here, we've also wanted to keep a bit the spirit of the place. And for example, here we have the color of the floor, which was previously already here. We didn't, it was not a choice. So okay. the idea of taking over is also like to keep a memory of the whatever was previously. And I wanted to also, I mean, I love the tiles, but to retile the space doesn't make any sense. So we basically brought the grid into this new location. And we used the tiles and the grid for our social media. And I think, yeah, it's kind of like a dialogue between, it inspires us and we just go with it.
Okay, so let's talk about this new space. You mentioned you brought the grid. So I'm guessing this grid is something you've installed?
Yes.
Okay, and this floor, it was the original color of the space?
It was the original color. We just redid it.
Okay.
Yeah, to give it a fresh look. And also the idea of the grid is to make installation easy and also inspiring, because then you have the ceiling, the walls that you can also like play around while you're installing, instead of like planning ahead and thinking where I'm going to drill a hole or etc. So I also feel like it's part of inviting the process of experimentation into the space.
Okay.
And we've experienced this already, that the grid is there and makes you want to like hang things in a certain way that you might not necessarily do if it was just a purely white wall.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Do you think this aesthetic is going to change maybe in the future?
I don't think that far ahead, first of all. I don't think most of us do yet.
Okay.
But I don't know. No, I think, like I said, I mean, the grid is really something that I like. It also takes me back to my architectural days.
Okay.
You know, the AutoCAD and Revit.
I can see what you mean.
XYZ thing going on. So yeah, I think it probably will stay. Who knows? And another thing that we also had in the previous space was a curtain. And I also love this element because it invites some kind of playfulness, but also you can change the space. You can remove it, you can open it, you can close it. There's like sort of like it's like a stage. It can become a theater if you want it to become a theater.
Yeah. So I know you don't do much architecture right now, but I can see like the architect in you just kind of coming out with the space.
Yeah.
Besides the aesthetics, how do you think Takeover distinguishes itself as an art space?
Maybe because we're still defining ourselves. There's no clear definition of who we are or where we're going. It's been very organic, and also I think it reflects a bit how we live in Lebanon to begin with. I mean, it's really day by day kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, there's no clear program yet. I imagine other spaces that are bigger, they think a year or two ahead. We are thinking really weeks ahead at this point. That's soon to change because, of course, we're learning and we're having a bigger network of people interested and knowing about the space. So now it's more like people coming to us to ask about what they could potentially do here. Whereas in the beginning, it was really me talking to the people I know or whose work I liked and inviting them to exhibit. Okay. So I guess this organic organization is really what maybe sets it apart from other spaces.
How can someone decide that they want to launch an installation or a performance at Takeover? Do they just talk to you?
Yeah, at the moment we have an open invitation. So we're inviting people to submit their portfolio as well as a proposal for what they would imagine like doing a takeover at Takeover. And we've received a few, and the first one will be opening September 28th.
Okay, that's really soon.
Yes.
That's in like 9 days. So something that I noticed about the previous space and that you kind of brought over to this one is that the space itself is very small, which a lot of maybe experienced people who work in art galleries or art spaces would think of it as kind of a barrier, but I think of it as creating an intimate experience between visitors, artist and visitor as well. So what do you think of this? Do you wish the space was larger? Do you see the project taking on a larger space in the future? I know you said you don't think that far ahead, but for the sake of this question.
I love the size of it. And the first space was even smaller. What I noticed was that it would get packed quite quickly. So during the openings, one person would be, entering into the exhibition or the show, and then everybody will be standing outside. It's just probably between people that don't know each other, it gets quite tight. So we moved into a slightly larger space to give that space for people to maneuver. But I wouldn't at the moment go any bigger than this, because I also feel like it's something that is special about it. It's not like a museum or like halls after halls. It's really one space. It's got a window to the street. It's quite direct. You can have an installation just for the street. You don't have to enter the space to experience something. We've had that before. And I love the intimacy of it. And it's also great because you can have maybe only one work and it will have already made an impact on the space, or it can have many works. So I think it gives me plenty of flexibility to play around here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, in museums, I sometimes feel like maybe the artist is overwhelmed by the amount of space that they're given, because the rooms tend to be quite large, and sometimes an artist's body of work tends to be a bit smaller than that. But I feel like in a space like this, you get to kind of see everything all at once, and it maybe gives you an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, saying museum is so far-fetched.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
Do you like that people pour out onto the streets?
I do. No, I love it. Safety can be a concern, but people tend to slow down. I love the street. I've always loved it. It doesn't get too busy, and when we have our openings, it's usually in the evening, so it's quite quiet. You really feel like you have the street to yourself.
Okay.
And we had a performance to move. So when Takeover was moving from the one building to the next, we had a performance by Tariq Haddad and Leticia Hakim. They had answered an open call, and they were doing a tug of war with a rope that was stretched between the two spaces. And what was amazing was that just across the other sidewalk, people were either sitting or standing. So it became like this kind of like a huge public space for that 1 hour that it was happening. So that was amazing. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the space, is I really want to push this interaction with the street. Okay.
Did you hope for this when you had first moved in?
Yes, because at the time even, when you're sitting in the back of the space, you're literally facing a huge window to the street. And it took me back to a time where I was traveling maybe with my husband in the beginning of our relationship, so we tried to travel as much as we could, and we stayed at a gallery Airbnb. Okay. So the bedroom was upstairs. In the morning you wake up, you open the rolling shutter, you fold out the table, and you have your coffee on the street.
Really?
With the gallery right behind you. So I love this interaction. It was so strange.
Okay, that's an interesting experience.
Yeah. So my dream house would be like this. I have a curtain, my private space is behind, but I have this choice to interact if I want to with the streets.
You must be quite frustrated with the lack of public spaces in Lebanon then.
Yeah. But the street is the public space. It's not a
you're
friendly
taking it
public
out
space.
there.
It's not a friend. So maybe the frustration is to have a friendly public space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a nice definition for it. So this past summer, you've had a few installations and exhibitions taking place. Can you tell us about some of them?
Let's say to commemorate the move, we had the performance on the street, and then after that we opened up the space to 3 artists. One was myself, Elsie Haddad, and Gabriel Fernani, and we basically had a shared studio for 1 month. And the idea was we each have a key. We can either come work alone, or we agree to meet together and work together. So that was a nice experience, and something I'd like to also replicate every now and then. And then we invited Lebanese Niche, who are a meme account on Instagram, to do their first non-Instagram post. Yeah. But a 3D post in the space. And that lasted for a whole month in August. And just this weekend, we had 2 artists, Laudy Issa and Elim Hanna, who did a durational performance in the space.
Can you, or actually, do you think you can categorize the kinds of installations you have at Takeover?
Yeah, I think the main point for us here is that experimentation is really something that we invite. And also this relationship with the street is something we encourage, as well as also the presence of the artists during the opening hours. So we do have sometimes myself or one of our team members here to open up, but I really encourage every artist who does something here to be here and meet the public. It also gives them a chance to see how their work is received or to interact, or I think it's important part of the process. Maybe it's not something you want to do, but it's nice to experience it.
Yeah, especially given the size of the space, I imagine it would be interesting to have the artists present.
Yeah, and you also, because it's on a street like this, you have people that are coming to visit you, but also people that are passing by, and there's all kinds of people. So this is also quite interesting. So you have very interesting conversations. Sometimes you have to explain what you're doing, and not everybody understands it. So it's nice to try to accommodate all kinds of public.
Yeah, I agree with you. So has there been one installation that really surprised you? Like something that you would have not pictured happening that actually did happen?
I would say this one, the last one, in Tending to Abundance, but also Bound Narratives, which was a photo book library curated by Roy Saadeh. He had done this first in Italy, where he had gathered photo books from the MENA region, because it's quite hard to get access to these books. Some of them are censored. Also, like shipping between these countries is very problematic. So he had kind of collected all these books. So what we had done, we had basically created this like mini bibliothèque library in the middle of the space, and the space was open for people to come and flip through the books. And what surprised me was actually like how long some people stayed. Some people stayed for hours. And I think that was great. And also sitting almost at level with the tires of the cars. It was such a strange experience to be sitting on the street. It was great.
Okay. Was there a reason that the table was set so low?
Well, because also the way we function is we have a low budget. We also try to do with what we have. So I had a carpet. I had one part of my desk that can be removed from its A-frame. I had a giant mirror that was found in the previous space. And so we just came up with a creative way to set it up with the minimum cost and effort. And yeah, this is how we always try to work as well. Yeah. We can source something, we can borrow something. We do it. We try not to spend money.
I like how malleable it is. I like how you can turn it into a library and then turn it into back into a space, have an exhibition, have an installation. Like, it's not something that we see very commonly in Lebanon, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe in doing so, you are kind of breaking some pre-existing narratives?
I wouldn't claim to be doing that, but I would like to think.
You're very modest.
I mean, because I know that there was a very rich cultural life at some point in Lebanon. So, and I don't claim to know everything of the cultural history of what has been done. So maybe at some point there were spaces like this. And I have heard of spaces like this, but I was maybe too young or not familiar with the scene to have experienced it. But for me, my personal interest, maybe because I studied architecture and I'm really interested in spaces and reading spaces, is that I'd like to see as many different things as I can happen here. So I also seek, if somebody is going to propose something that hasn't been done before, that's also interesting to me, because I'd like to see how that would play out and what that might lead to.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some projects that you would like to see before the end of the year?
Well, I can prematurely say that we are programming 6 open calls, and each one has a certain either media or thematic. And one of them is a 24/7 video projection, or kind of either projection or screen. of a video piece to the street. So I'm excited to see how that would change kind of the interaction we have with the street.
Have you ever gotten any kind of random interactions from people just passing by who stopped and were like, what's going on here? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, some, like when we had Lebanese niche, some people thought it was a fruit juice shop because it looked so familiar with a plastic table and all these like fruit. We had a fruit tablecloth. So one man wanted to see if we had juice. Others, like they were passing by the library, they were going home, they went in, they spent an hour with the books. Yeah, so it's all the time.
Okay, that's
quite
cool.
random. Yeah.
What are some challenges you faced with the space?
I don't know, I have interesting neighbors maybe.
Do you get some complaints?
Complaints? No. I often I see them like puzzled, looking at like, what is she doing? How is this space existing here?
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a neighborhood that was recently quite posh now, and it died down for quite a while, and now it's picking up again. So they're not really used to having, let's say, this kind of art or the young crowd that we attract. But I think it's nice. In the previous space, we had a neighbor that came to me at the closing day. He's like, I'm so sad you're leaving. We really loved having you.
That's really sweet.
And they're like in their 80s, you know? So, yeah, I mean, that's not a challenge. I think it's a perk to interact with different kinds of people. But right now, really, it's the generator.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's my main challenge right now. It just cuts in the middle of the day.
Does it affect the way you work?
I mean, if we have something that needs electricity, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's good that we don't have too many challenges at the moment.
I mean, I would knock on wood, but I don't have any near me, but yeah. So my final question is, what are some interventions that you would like to personally lead in the space?
I've never done a performance. I've never performed. And I think after this weekend, I was quite... I saw that it's something I could probably do if I took my time and thought of something. So maybe this will be the space where I do a performance.
Okay.
Yeah, still have no idea what it would be, but definitely, again, the big window and the flexibility of the space, I think is interesting to explore for me.
Okay. And on that note, let's put an end to this episode. Where can people find the program for the coming months? Let's say our immediate go-to is Instagram, so at takeover.beirut. We have a monthly newsletter which you can subscribe to. We have our website, which is takeoverbeirut.com, and we're trying to keep it up to date as much as possible. So yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ieva, so much for having us, and I can't wait to see what the space brings in the coming few months.
Me too.